I need you to please watch this. Look at the people who are ruling us.
We can mobilize 280,000 soldiers within weeks. We have 62 F-18s. Your next question is going to be, do they fly without Americans? No, they don't. First is a direct answer to the question of this panel, can Europe defend itself? My answer is unequivocally yes.
Without the Americans?
Without the Americans, I mean...
How?
Well, look...
But you're relying on them for these key elements. You said earlier that Europe can defend itself without the Americans. If it comes down...
not exact. That's not a quote.
More or less. More or less. We'll go back to the transcript. Yeah. More or less. More or less.
I love journalists.
But
he started off by talking about... he's been asked a series of questions. That's the Finnish Prime Minister, if I'm not mistaken, right? He's been asked a series of questions, and he talks about, yeah, they can mobilize this, and the planes cannot fly without Americans. Literally, the next question he's asked, can Europe defend itself without America? He goes, unequivocally, yes. Unequivocally, yes. 11 minutes later, he denied it. This man didn't even give us 2 business days. He didn't even give us 1 business day. This is the standards of politicians today. And you know why I don't blame them? Because they know the rest of us will do absolutely fucking nothing about it. This man said, we have American F-18s, but they cannot fly without Americans. 3 minutes later, says we can unequivocally defend ourselves without America. 11 minutes later, says, I didn't say that shit. He didn't even give us 1 business day.
When President Trump is doing good stuff, I will praise him. And I don't mind him publishing text messages. And if anyone thinks here, again, that the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming. You can't. We can't. We need each other. And why do we need each other? I tell you. First of all, because also the US needs NATO. And the US is not only in NATO to prevent a mistake after the First World War, not to re-engage with Europe. And then again, the long arm of history reaching out to the US again in the Second World War, as Churchill famously said in his speech in 1941 in the US Congress. They are also in NATO because for the US to stay safe, and by the way, Arctic region is evidence here, they need a secure Arctic, they need a secure Euro-Atlantic, and they also need a secure Europe. So the US has every interest in NATO as much as Canada and the European NATO allies. But for Europe, if you really want to go it alone, and those of you who are pleading for that, forget that you can ever get there with 5%. It will be 10%. You have to build up your own nuclear capability. That costs billions and billions of euros. You will lose then, in that scenario, you would lose the ultimate guarantor of our freedom, which is the US nuclear umbrella. Good luck.
That is wild. That is fucking wild. But yeah, NATO chief has come out and said what he needs to say. What are your opinions? Put in the comments.
Je voudrais vous raconter ce qui s'est passé dans mon bureau, puisqu'en fait j'ai eu, à la demande de l'ambassade américaine à Paris, j'ai rencontré 2 émissaires de l'administration Trump qui sont venus. On devait avoir une discussion sur les droits de l'homme, comme j'en ai régulièrement avec des diplomates de pays alliés. Et assez rapidement, la conversation a tourné autour de la situation pénale de Marine Le Pen, avec l'idée de chercher des éléments auprès de moi et peut-être auprès d'autres personnes qu'ils allaient rencontrer, qui pourraient accréditer l'idée qu'il s'agirait d'un procès purement politique pour l'empêcher d'être candidate, et donc dans une action qui aurait comme but de rechercher des éléments avisés d'ingérence. Et j'ai été tellement surprise de cet échange et de la tonalité de cet échange, même qui restait très courtois, que j'ai fait quelque chose que je ne fais jamais quand j'ai des échanges avec des diplomates étrangers. J'ai fait une alerte auprès du ministère des Affaires étrangères sur le contenu de cette conversation. Il me semblait que c'était mon devoir de faire cette alerte-là, et je sais que ça a été pris au sérieux par le ministère des Affaires étrangères.
C'était quand?
Ça, c'était, on était fin mai, donc c'était le 28 mai 2025. 2 mois plus tard, il y a eu le juge Alexandre de Moraes du Brésil qui a été sous sanction, oui, après avoir jugé un proche, voilà, donc un allié de Donald Trump. Et à la fin de l'été, c'était Nicolas Guillou, le juge de la CPI. Et être sous sanction, ça veut dire quand même que votre nom est associé à une liste de pires terroristes de la planète, de grands narcotrafiquants, et que vous ne pouvez plus vivre normalement puisque énormément de services du quotidien vous sont interdits. Donc c'est extrêmement inquiétant. Donc moi, si je dis ça, c'est juste pour dire très bien, il n'y a pas de menace actuelle sur les juges français.
Non, mais c'est ce dont vous parlez quand vous dites qu'il y a de nouvelles formes d'intimidation et qu'il y a un projet politique.
Et il y a un projet politique derrière et qu'on doit être vigilant. D'abord sur ce qui se passe en France, bien sûr, mais il faut aussi regarder, prendre la mesure de ce qui se passe aussi à l'échelle du monde, et que cette offensive, elle nous dépasse, elle dépasse le périmètre français, et c'est pour ça que cette vigilance appelle aussi une grande détermination dans la manière de répondre à ces menaces-là.
I'll say this again. The World Economic Forum is currently happening in Davos right now, and the main theme almost every single person has come on to talk about is rules-based order no longer exists. The system that we all grew up in no longer exists. So we're now at a place where the powerful can do what the fuck they want because they're powerful. And it has always been it was the powerful's job to protect the weak, how society is, from religion to everything. Now the powerful have said, fuck you, I'm strong, ain't shit you can do about it. And you see what she's saying. Judges from foreign nations are now scared of prosecuting Trump's people. They're being put on they're being sanctioned. And when you're sanctioned, you're on the same category as El Chapo. So can you imagine you being a judge right now, prosecuting someone who has broken the law, but because that person is Trump's friend, you are now on the same level as El Chapo. You cannot travel anywhere. You can't open up bank accounts. Welcome to the future.
I said, I guarantee you. But I actually sided with Emmanuel, who probably is in the room too. And I like him. I actually like him. Hard to believe, isn't it? And I said, Emmanuel, you're going to have to lift the price of that pill to $20, maybe $30. Think of that. That means it's a doubling of prescription drugs. Might be a tripling, might be a quadrupling. It's not easy. No, Donald, I will not do that. I said, yes, you will, 100%. He said, no. You're asking me to double. I said, Emmanuel, you've been taking advantage of the United States for 30 years with prescription drugs. You really should do it, and you will do it. I have no doubt. In fact, I am 100% sure you're going to. No, I will not do it. Because yes, in all fairness, he has to double or triple. Because the world being a bigger place than the United States, it's not that you meet in the middle. You just have to go up some, and we come down a lot. They go up a little, we come down a lot. So we're at $130, they're at 10. So they may have to go to 20 or 30. No more than that. I said, Emmanuel, you're going to be doubling or tripling? No. I said, here's the story, Emmanuel. The answer is you're going to do it fast. And if you don't, I'm putting a 25% tariff on everything that you sell into the United States and a 100% tariff on your wines and champagnes. And that's about 10 times more than what I'm requesting. And you're going to do it. I don't want to go public with it, but you may make me do that. No, Donald, I will do it. I will do it. It took me, on average, 3 minutes a country. Saying the same thing. You said, no, I will not do it. You're asking me to double the cost of prescription. I said, that's right, because you've been screwing us for 30 years.
This man is going to give us content to talk about for months. This man went to that was just flat out humiliation. Ooh, booty call. That was a flat out humiliation. He wanted the whole world to know that the French president does what he says when he says it. So a drug in America costs $130. That same drug costs $10 in France. Instead of America to bring theirs down, he told him to double his. Macron said, no, I won't double it. He said, if you don't double it, I'm going to put a tariff on 25% tariffs on everything and 100% on your wine and champagne. He said, Macron said, okay, I'll do it. This is crazy.
The Indians are now an extremely powerful political force in Canada. This was the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, meeting with representatives of the Indian community because he depends on them for his votes. In last year's federal election, 22 Indian people of Indian descent were elected to Parliament. Okay, so in Parliament, there's 343 seats. 22 of them now are Indian. How many Chinese? How many MPs of Chinese origin? There are less than 10. So even though the Chinese have been there longer, and even though they're actually more numerous Chinese than Indians, the Indians are extremely powerful political force. Now, a lot of it is because Indians come from democracy, so they're very good at debate. They're very good at organizing. They're very good at collective action. And that's what leads them to excel in the Canadian political system. At the same time, we can imagine that if current trends continue, if the immigrant population from India increases, and if the Indians continue to amass more political power, there could be a situation where the Indians take over the Canadian government in like 20 or 40 years' time. So there's a real risk that in Canada, that their native population gets replaced by the Indians. And this is happening elsewhere as well.
The European Union and India are natural strategic partners because we have so much in common.
Excuse me?
We are the two biggest democracies. We are rooted in the rule of law. Pluralism and respect for human dignity is at our core.
Well, that was Ursula von der Leyen. I think I said her name right. She's the whatever the fuck of the European Union. And India and Europe just signed an agreement that would see more Indians migrating to Europe to take up jobs. All I gotta say is we've learned globalization is moving at the pace globalization moved is not the pace we needed it to move. There was an ulterior motive. The people behind this have an ulterior motive. We've seen it. The United States has had the same issue. Canada has had the same issue. Sweden have had the same issue with Africans. Mass migration at that scale sees a clash of cultures, and it's always going to be a problem. But somehow Europe has signed a deal to bring in more Indians.
Building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
So Trump was at Davos, it was at Davos earlier today, and he gave a speech. So you already know what that means. The internet is going to have a field day for the next 2 days. Every news station this man is going to give us content. This page, I got shit to talk about for the next month, just based on his speech alone. But yeah, mask off, Canada. He told you, you exist because of America, Mark Carney. Next time you're over there talking shit about globalization and you don't want to be with America and rules-based order and you want to ally with China, he's letting you know, bitch, you exist because of us. If we decide you don't exist anymore, there ain't shit you could do about it. This is fucking insane. If Governor Carney thinks he's going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. The President of the United States of America just called the Prime Minister of Canada a fucking governor, intimating that Canada is a fucking colony of the United States. Let's go back. Breaking. President Trump says he will impose a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods and products if Canada makes a trade deal with China. Just 8 days ago, Canada announced a new strategic partnership with China. We're back to step one of the tariff playbook. So Trump is now threatening Canada with 100% tariffs if Canada signs a trade deal with China, right? Let's watch this.
Prime Minister Carney is in China. How do you see the deals Canada and China have just signed, trade deals between the two partners?
Well, it's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
Yes, it's Arabic in the background. I'm watching Yalla shoot Liverpool. I don't know. In America, you got to subscribe to 2 different TV stations to catch Premier League. I'm not kidding. So I bootleg that shit. Everybody else, Serie A, La Liga, Champions League, I don't mind paying. But Premier League, fuck you and your greed. But back to the subject at hand. 8 days ago, Trump said, that's good. Carney should do what's good for him and his country. 8 days later, today, this man called Carney a fucking governor. Now, do you want to see the most pivotal moment in Canada's history when it comes to being a colony of the United States? I'll show you.
Once a country yields its energy.
We have not
Once
done it.
a country yields its agriculture.
Wrong
Once
again.
a country opens itself up to a subsidy war with the United States
Wrong
on
again.
terms of definition, then the political ability of this country to sustain the influence of the United States to remain as an independent nation, that is
Mr.
lost
Turner,
forever,
Mr.
and that's
Turner,
the issue of this election.
Mr. Turner, I today, sir, as a Canadian, believe genuinely in what I am doing. I believe it is right for Canada. I believe that in my own modest way, I am nation building because I believe this benefits Canada and I love Canada.
We built a country, east and west and north. We built it on an infrastructure that deliberately resisted the continental pressure of the United States. For 120 years we've done it. With one signature of a pen, you've reversed that, thrown us into the north-south influence of the United States, and will reduce us, I'm sure, to a colony of the United States, because when the economic levers go, the political independence is sure to follow.
That was a political campaign, by the way. That was a political debate. So the question now is, who do you think won that campaign? Whose political career do you think ended at that moment? That was a very pivotal moment. I actually saw that video and I downloaded it, not because of talking about Canada, because I was trying to prove a point in how the gentleman whose political career, that Mr. Turner guy, his political career died after that. It never came back. But he was talking about things that I'm talking about. Building infrastructure. Once you give up the sovereignty of your nation to another nation, it's over. Nigeria has given up our agriculture to Bill Gates, an American billionaire. We've given our healthcare to United States government. We've given our fucking taxes to front, like. But anyways, Canada is now reaping the benefits of uniting their nation and their economy with the United States. The president of the United States of America is now calling the Canadian Prime Minister a fucking governor, and there ain't really a shit he could do about it. Because guess what? Let's see how this tariff is gonna. Because now Trump is telling the world. Like, this was a statement. The Governor Carney, I will put 100% tariff. That means if Carney does anything that Trump does not want, that tariff. Canada belongs to us, bitch. I'm never showing my passport to go to another fucking state. Vancouver? Yeah.
How are you responding to Trump's threats of 100% tariffs?
Well, the first thing is that, Canada respects our engagements, our commitments. Il y a des engagements dans l'ACM. We have commitments under CUSMA that not to pursue free trade agreements with non-market economies without prior notification. We have no intention of doing that with China or any other non-market economy. What we've done with China is to rectify some issues that developed in the last couple of years. In many respects, we're going, to use the expression, back to the future with respect to EVs, with respect to agriculture, with respect to fish products and other food products, but with additional protections. So, for example, back in 2023, we didn't have a cap on the number of EVs. We didn't have a requirement for a large proportion of those EVs to be affordable, highly affordable EVs for Canadians. So it's entirely consistent with CUSMA, with our obligations, which we very much respect under CUSMA, and will continue to work that way forward.
Where are those damn Canadians that came in my comments talking about we're gonna do what the fuck we want to do? Trump, blah blah blah. Trump, blah blah blah. American colony bitches.
President,
Go ahead.
Mr. President, what do you think about the UK getting into business with China? Keir Starmer is in Beijing.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China. Canada is not doing well. They're doing very poorly, and you can't look at China as the answer. I know China very well. I know President Xi's a friend of mine. I know him very well, but that's a big hurdle to go over when you get Canada. The first thing they're going to do is say you're not allowed to play ice hockey anymore. That's not good.
No matter what you do in this life, one thing you can never do is predict how another person is going to react. No matter how much you are positive they're going to react, you really never really know. But yeah, Trump is bugging out. He's freaking out because now Canada and China are friends, and UK, Keir Starmer last week he went to China, being the first British leader in God knows how long to go to China, and he's trying to make some new deals. All the deals that were American are now starting to become Chinese.
Breaking news coming from China now. The Chinese and UK governments have confirmed that there will be visa-free travel for Britons visiting China for under 30 days. There's a few other lines about services as well, going on to say that the UK and China will conduct a feasibility study to explore whether to enter negotiations towards a bilateral services agreement, adding in addition to that they will launch a new partnership to expand the UK's world-leading services sector in China, and if agreed, it would lead to the establishment of clear and legally binding rules for UK firms doing business in China. Like I say, we're also hearing that China has confirmed visa-free travel for Britons visiting the country for under 30 days.
First, it was Canada. They got threatened with 100% tariffs. Now it's UK. Trump is hemorrhaging partners. He's hemorrhaging allies. But hey, this is the end goal. They want, like, for Project 2025, everything they're doing, the result, people are like, America's a crumbling empire. This is exactly what they want. This is exactly what they're looking for.
I fully associate myself with Premier Smith's comments just then. I expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect, and then move on to what we can do together. Thank you.
I'd like to just take and pause a moment. I read an article last night in the Financial Times about a group of people from Alberta, I won't describe them as Albertans, who went to the White House seeking the assistance of the United States to break up our country. Now, I understand the desire to hold a referendum, to talk about the issues you want to talk about in Canada. We got free speech, that's important. But to go to a foreign country and to ask for assistance in breaking up Canada, there's an old-fashioned word for that, and that word is treason. It is completely inappropriate to seek to weaken Canada, to seek to go and ask for assistance to break up this country from a foreign power. And with respect, a president who has not been particularly respectful of Canada's sovereignty. I'm going to be raising that issue at this table. I think that while we can respect the right of any Canadian to express themselves, to vote in a referendum, I think we need to draw the line at people seeking the assistance of foreign countries to break up this beautiful land of ours that our forefathers, our foremothers, our parents, our grandparents fought for. You know, there is a line. And especially at this time when all Canadians have to pull together, I think we can speak as one voice.
Can you see these hypocrites? It's perfectly fine to divide Somalia. Let's recognize Somaliland. Let's divide Somalia. Let's weaken the Horn of Africa. It was perfectly fine when 9 Biafrans living in America, veterans, went to White House to seek America's help to come and bomb Nigeria, to split up Nigeria. It was perfectly fine. Y'all supported it. But now when it's happening to you, it's treason. You gonna learn. I love that Trump is teaching everyone a lesson because Gunther. Yeah, remember Gunther? Gunther, yeah, mein Freund, was geht? Gunther was there. Let's divide Nigeria. Let's push for Biafra. Let's divide Nigeria. When Trump turned on Greenland, Gunther started freaking out. We're gonna take your military bases. When the Biafrans came, trying to split up Nigeria, exactly the point. It weakens a nation. For those of you saying you want all that regional shit, break up Nigeria. The whites know why they don't want to break up, but you want to break up. But anyways, I think it's incredibly funny now that they're going through the same thing, and they suddenly have a problem.
Oh man. Okay. It's just
it's what they want.
America's two closest allies stepped away in the same week. Canada declared it's over, and Britain turned to China. Canada's Prime Minister declared American homogeny over during a speech at Davos. Now Britain is acting on it. So here's what happened. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is headed to Beijing to revive what the UK and China once called the Golden Era, a partnership that made Britain China's closest ally from 2015 to 2018, before conservative governments dismantled it. Now, Labour is rebuilding. AstraZeneca, BP, HSBC, Rolls-Royce, and Standard Chartered will join a new UK-China CEO Council alongside China's biggest banks and BYD. The price of entry, Britain just approved China's largest embassy in Europe. And this is exactly what Carney described in his speech in Davos. Middle powers diversifying, building alternatives, moving away from the US death spiral. America has decided to transition to fascism and isolation, their choice. The two former allies are wisely getting out, and others will follow. Join us for more global perspectives on Substack and culturalperspective.com.
U.S. President Trump has warned the United Kingdom against getting into business with China after British PM and President Xi had a meeting yesterday. Well, the meeting saw a reset in UK and China relations, but Trump said to this, to quote him, he said it was dangerous for the UK to do business with China, and more so for Canada. Does the ministry have any comment on this? Thank you.
中方愿同各国本着互利共赢的精神加强合作，造福各国人民。
Why are America's allies moving closer to China? Well, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney certainly summed it up best at Davos last week when he said,
"We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition."
It all boils down to the United States no longer being the most reliable, dependable ally of the post-war era as President Trump rewrites the rule book. In the past few weeks, China has hosted the leaders of South Korea, Canada, Finland, and the United Kingdom, all close allies of the United States. Trade deals have been agreed to, ranging from critical minerals supply to tariff reduction and visa-free travel. Even the French President, Emmanuel Macron, is talking about allowing Chinese investment into his country. Now, what does China get out of this? Well, it gets to project itself as a benevolent and reliable partner. It gains access to these markets, and it also allows it to rub salt into that rupture. Just to be clear, these are not free trade deals with China. They're more symbolic than anything. It's not going to move the needle on any of these economies, but the direction of travel will not be reversed whilst President Trump is at the wheel, and it certainly sets an interesting stage come April when President Trump is expected to visit China.
工党政府对中英关系发展做出过重要的贡献。你公开提出中国是机遇，同中国接触是必选题，我对此表示赞赏。中方愿同英方发展长期稳定的全面战略伙伴关系， 这将造福两国人民，也惠及世界。
This is a historic visit, the first by a British Prime Minister in 8 years. Now, we've made this trip because I believe it is strongly in our common interest to find positive ways to work together. And that has been our long-standing position.
Anyone in Britain thinks that the Chinese government or the authorities at large would have any interest in hacking into the British politicians' accounts to gain information, I think that allegation is ludicrous. And if anyone in the Chinese government or authorities want to do that, it's completely out of their mind.
The British security services have spent 2 years or more looking at these allegations. Clearly somebody was hacking into the MPs' accounts and indeed into the Electoral Commission. So if it wasn't China, then who could it have been?
I would say China is fully engaged in so many things domestically, as well as in dealing with the headwind in the international arena. And no one has any additional bandwidth to care about the domestic elections in Britain.
You might be wondering why French President Emmanuel Macron behaves like this. No, he is not stupid, he doesn't have an eye problem, and he is not trying to be James Bond. 90% of our communication is body language. Professional politicians like Macron use this for strategic advantage. He is signaling strength to the US president in Davos, who is hell-bent on capturing Greenland. Trump wants a piece of ice, Greenland, and he effectively shatters the Western alliance. Thus, a rules-based world no longer applies, since the biggest Western nation, United States, who wrote most of the rules, do not follow the rules. Instead, like Ursula von der Leyen said, Canadian PM said, we are transitioning into a world of big D politics. With this, Macron is signaling to USA that France is ready for tough guy power politics.
Bon, alors pourquoi vous me faites dire ça? Donc, moi je vous dis, tout le monde se bat. Vous avez vécu quelque chose de terrible. Tout le monde se bat, quelle que soit la couleur de peau. Et n'opposez pas les gens. N'opposez pas les gens. Si vous opposez les gens, on est foutus. Parce que vous êtes contents d'être en France. Parce que si c'était pas la France, pour vous dire, vous seriez 10 000 fois plus dans la merde. Il n'y a pas un endroit de l'océan Indien où on aide autant les gens. C'est la réalité. Et donc, on ne peut pas vouloir être un département français et dire que ça ne marche pas dès que la France est en solidarité. Quel est l'autre territoire de cette région comme ailleurs qui livre de l'eau, du fret, des soignants comme on le fait ici? Alors il faut que tout le monde se respecte. Mais bon sang, on tiendra jusqu'au bout si on est une équipe. Et donc vous avez un choix simple. Vous êtes une équipe ou vous divisez.
Video of French President Emmanuel Macron publicly racially abusing and embarrassing former Burkina Faso President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore has resurfaced and is going viral. In this video from 2017, French President Macron publicly embarrassed the president of Burkina Faso, following which the latter left the hall. When one of the Burkinabe students asked President Macron a question about Burkina Faso's constant power cuts, this is what the French president had to say.
You speak to me as if France was still a colonial power, but I do not want to take care of electricity problems in the universities of Burkina Faso. That's his job. That's the job of the president. So on the other hand, I reassure you. Oh, what's this? He's going away. Stay there. Maybe he's off to repair the air conditioning.
Macron would shamelessly tell French media that it was just a joke and that some Africans need to have thicker skins. After being publicly disrespected by President Macron, President Kabore went on to lose respect throughout the country and was portrayed as an obedient French puppet. These sentiments contributed to his removal in 2022 in a peaceful coup. Burkina Faso is now led by a young Pan-African army captain, Ibrahim Traoré, who spearheaded the latest coup and was named interim president until elections are held in July 2024.
France occupied Burkina Faso for generations. They stole gold and uranium, billions of dollars of resources for pennies on the dollar, while the people of Burkina Faso suffered. But Burkina Faso's new revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, says no more. Traoré has kicked out all of the French troops from his country in Africa. He has banned exports of gold to Paris, and he has dropped French as the official language of Burkina Faso. It's a total cultural, political, and economic reset. Now, obviously, French President Emmanuel Macron is kind of upset with all of this. He has made his position known. And President Traoré beautifully responded. He said, if anyone is ungrateful, it is him, Emmanuel Macron. France exists today thanks to our ancestors. They should pray for us. And Burkina Faso is making it clear that this is not about some attack on France. This is about independence and sovereignty. Just last week, Burkina Faso's President Traoré decided to release 4 French spies who were guilty of attempting to commit a coup against the president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, in 2022. The message is clear. Burkina Faso is not the pawn of France or the Dutch or the United States anymore, but forgiveness is also at the heart of their revolution. Traoré says that this is not just a split, it is a revolution with global ripples. I couldn't have said it better myself.
He also insulted all Africans.
I think they forgot to say thank you to us. It's not a big deal. It will come with time.
There is a part that caught my attention where he talked about ingratitude.
Gratitude, I am well aware, is a non-transmissible disease to humans.
He is human. Our ingratitude is not transmissible to him. This is how this gentleman sees Africa, sees Africans. We are not human. In his eyes, I think that if he is not an atheist and he prays, every morning when he wakes up and prays, he should also pray to the Africans. Because it is thanks to our ancestors that there is a France today. He should pray to us.
Religion is multiculturalism. The belief that diversity is good, mainly because white people love ethnic food. When white people think multiculturalism, they think ethnic restaurants, Mexican food, Chinatown, and so they love multiculturalism. But if immigrants become politically ambitious like the Indians, no, you can't have that. So that's why Indians are so derided in Canada, because the Indians are actually politically active and effective. And but hey, if the Indians stick to making samosas every day, Canadians would love them. So in a multicultural society, what's really important is to be an open society and not have a distinct cultural identity. And this has created a lot of problems in Canada. It'll create further problems in Canada. And the third major religion is bureaucratism, right? Because if you don't have your own ethnic identity, if you don't have a core ambition, then you need a regulatory state, a bureaucracy, in order to maintain everything together. You need people to tell you what to do. And Canadians worship authority. Canadians are extremely obedient. Canadians believe experts know everything. Okay? Canada, the nation, I hate to say this because I grew up there, right? But Canada, it's a toxic asset right now. Housing prices are like, sky high. The Canadian economy, 40% of the Canadian economy is real estate speculation. Canada is this glorified money laundering operation. It's lost all its legitimacy by supporting this genocide in Gaza. There are hundreds of thousands of homeless in Canada, yet Carney still continues to send tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine to fight a pointless war, causing about 1 million Ukrainians to die for no particular reason. These Canadian companies refuse to invest in the country, and many of them are fleeing the country. So Canada is a toxic asset, and what you do with a toxic asset as a banker is you sell it to foreigners. And who are the foreigners? The Qataris and the Chinese, okay? So that's the grand strategy that Carney has. And everything else, like this grand rhetoric about a rules-based international order, it's just, as you say, marketing. That's all it is, okay? Don't pay any attention to it. Watch what he does. So what he's going to do is this. He's going to call an early election, probably late spring, okay, April, He's going to win by a landslide. He's going to have a supermajority, and then he'll start to asset strip Canada. Okay? That's the plan. Major increase is in housing prices. Okay? So Canada, these past 5 years, has seen a huge influx of immigrants, and this has caused housing prices to skyrocket. The United States, which has a much larger economy than Canada, the housing prices are pretty stable. You can still afford to buy a house if you're a young person in the United States, not in Canada. Okay? You see this huge spike in Canada. The housing prices are now unaffordable. This is a chart that shows you economic growth as compared to housing prices. So as you can see in the United States, housing prices, there's a correlation between income and housing prices. Okay? This is pretty reasonable. In Canada, it is not reasonable. Okay? So GDP, housing prices is growing like this, but housing prices is just skyrocketing. And that's why Canadians feel as though the Canadian dream of one day having their own house, it's basically dead. So one strange thing is that as Canada lets in more immigrants, and as property prices go up, you would think that they would build more and more houses. But as you can see, housing supply, okay? Housing supply, it's pretty flat, even though immigration is going up. Does anyone know why this would be the case? Why is it that you have a policy of letting in more immigrants, but you don't have a policy of building more housing for them? That's kind of strange, right? Can anyone guess why that would be?
Money, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly correct, okay? So policy is not being controlled by what's best for the nation and the people. It's controlled by vested interests that will make money off the process, right? So as you say, real estate developers can make money off this process, but the people who benefit the most are actually property owners, right? So if you already have a house, if the supply is constant but the demand goes up, then you know from economics class that the value of a house increases artificially. So it's making homeowners very happy. Okay? And that's why you have this crisis in Canada. Canada, like 10 years ago, introduced a new policy called MAID, called Medical Assistance in Dying, euthanasia. And the idea here is that if you feel life is meaningless, if you're depressed, if you feel that you cannot cure your disease, the government will help you kill yourself. The government will let you die. Now, the big question then is, yeah, but 25 years ago, this was illegal in the world, right? Suicide was illegal. If you helped someone kill himself, you'd be put in prison. This would be basically murder. So what's the difference between suicide and the government helping you kill yourself? Well, there really isn't, okay? But the government says there is a difference, okay? So this is a brochure from the Canadian government, explaining to you why suicide is bad, okay? Suicide is bad, but suicide by government is good, okay? And it's really stupid. It's disgusting. It's disgustingly stupid, okay? What they say is that if you do suicide, well, you do it alone and you shock your friends and family. But if you do MAID, then everyone knows you're killing yourself, and so they won't be so sad when you die. Right? If you kill yourself, you might screw it up. But if the government does it for you, you won't screw it up because it's being facilitated by professionals who know what they're doing. All right? If you think this is stupid, there's more stupidity to come. All right? And what this tells us is, we discussed this last class, the number of days required to be approved for suicide. As you can see in the Netherlands, sorry, this is Oregon actually. This is Oregon, United States. Okay, the number of days have been going down, but it's still like at most a month, okay? In Canada, they'll do it in like 10 days for you. They won't even think about it. They're like, you want to kill yourself? Do it, man. Good for you.
Question to you is how likely is it that such a major shift in international distribution can occur without triggering major wars between the great powers?
Right. So let's go to Mark Carney's speech at the World Economic Forum at Davos. this past week because it went viral and it got a lot of attention. So there's a direct response to Donald Trump's argument that for the longest time, NATO, Europe, Canada have been free riding off of America's generosity and goodwill. It is America that provides defense for Europe. It's American consumers that have made Europe wealthy. So Europe is just freeloading of American generosity. And in his speech, Mark Carney had a counter-argument. He had a rebuttal to Trump's viewpoint. Basically, what he said is that this rules-based international order, it was established for the benefit of the American empire. And so, for the longest time, it was hypocritical. It was inconsistent. And the Western allies went along with this because they benefit from it. But now, America has changed its attitude. It's no longer focused on consensus. It no longer cares about multilateralism. And so now, if the middle powers like Canada are to survive, they need to really develop a rules-based international order. And I think that's a framework for Europe to now merge with BRICS. Because BRICS, the very idea of BRICS is a win-win cooperation where everyone is an equal and there's no dominant power. An example, of course, is the Shanghai Gold Exchange or the Gold Corridor, where gold is distributed amongst different ports throughout the world, in Dubai, in Shanghai, wherever. But it's like a blockchain. It's a ledger, open ledger, where gold becomes the basis for a new financial system. How America has changed its attitude. It is no longer focused on consensus. It no longer cares about multilateralism. And so now, if the middle powers like Canada are to survive, they need to really develop a rules-based international order. And I think that's a framework for Europe to now merge with BRICS. Because BRICS, the very idea of BRICS is a win-win cooperation where everyone is an equal and there's no dominant power. An example, of course, is the Shanghai Gold Exchange or the Gold Corridor, where gold is distributed amongst different ports throughout the world, in Dubai, in Shanghai, wherever. But it's like a blockchain. It's a ledger, open ledger, where gold becomes the basis for a new financial system. And so China is very much focused on multilateralism, on win-win cooperation, on reciprocity. And that's the future that Mark Carney believes the middle powers should strive for. And that's a framework that Mark Carney and the other middle powers, the Europeans, would like to implement. The problem, as you say, is there is no way that the American empire will just fade away and let BRICS, this new multilateral system, develop. The problem, as you say, is there is no way that the American empire will just fade away and let BRICS, this new multilateral system, develop. And so in the national security strategy, it's very explicit in that America will not give up its empire, but it will change the tactics by which it rules the empire. So no more multilateralism, no more liberal order, just pure focus on national best interest. That's number one. Number two is that it will from now on perceive its allies as vassals. So all these US treasuries that Europe holds, Japan holds, South Korea holds, it actually belongs to America. It is America that controls the resources and the wealth of its allies. So basically the vassalization of their American empire, okay? That's number two. Number three, and this is most crucial, is that it will challenge China wherever it can. So even though America will remove its military from East Asia, it will continue to challenge China in Africa, in Europe, in South America. It claims hegemony over the Western Hemisphere, and it will embargo China's economic development from now on, okay? So we are seeing right now a clash of titans, where on one hand, China is leading a new international order that is multilateral, reciprocal, and win-win. And then the Americans want to maintain their empire. So that's a conflict that we're seeing right now.
Well, Since 1945, though, this system of consensus and multilateralism, it was managed under the clear leadership of the United States. I mean, there was no illusions that it was not the dominant power, the hegemon. So once you're the only game in town, there's no competitors, it's easier to be a benign hegemon because they will naturally gravitate towards the United States. But as the US now has China as the main rival, it's, yeah, as you said, it has to use more harder tools, but the harder or more aggressively the US.
America will not give up its empire, but it will change the tactics by which it rules the empire. So no more multilateralism, no more liberal order, just pure focus on national best interest. That's number one. Number two is that it will from now on perceive its allies as vassals. So all these US treasuries that Europe holds, Japan holds, South Korea holds, it actually belongs to America. It is America that controls the resources and the wealth of its allies. So basically the vassalization of their American empire. Okay, that's number two. Number three, and this is most crucial, is that it will challenge China wherever it can. So even though America will remove its military from East Asia, it will continue to challenge China in Africa, in Europe, in South America. It claims hegemony over the Western Hemisphere, and it will embargo China's economic development from now on, okay? So we are seeing right now a clash of titans, where on one hand, China is leading a new international order that is multilateral, reciprocal, and win-win. And then the Americans want to maintain their empire. So that's a conflict that we're seeing right now.
Well, since 1945, though, this system of consensus and multilateralism, it was managed under the clear leadership of the United States. I mean, there was no illusions that it was not the dominant power, the hegemon. So once you're the only game in town, there's no competitors, it's easier to be a benign hegemon because they will naturally gravitate towards the United States. But as the US now has China as the main rival, it's, yeah, as you said, it has to use more harder tools, but the harder...
If you have the power to take it, then it's yours. If you have the capability to inflict something, then you are entitled to inflict it. And if you're too weak to stop it, well, that's your problem. This is the system in the West. Your safety is your own responsibility. And the strong have no obligation whatsoever to restrain themselves from exploiting you. If they can exploit you, it's their right to do it. That's the actual operating system in America, in the West. And you need to know the way that your society actually functions and not the lies that they tell you about how that society functions. Or you're not going to get anywhere. You're never going to get ahead that way. Just trudging away on that treadmill, like I said. And while you're doing that, while you're trudging on that treadmill, you're not building power, which is what you need. You're not creating alternatives, which is what you need. You're not developing functional independence, which is what you need. You're trapped in this cycle of appealing to power, then disappointment when you don't get it, then outrage, then more appeals, more disappointment, more outrage. It's an endless loop. That endless loop just keeps you psychologically dependent upon your oppressors while they continue doing exactly what they have always done. Do you understand me? With you sitting at some diversity workshop trying to convince people to give up their entitlement, to give up their privilege, because it's the right thing to do, you think that has any currency? I'm telling you, as long as you keep giving Uncle Sam the benefit of the doubt, you're giving Uncle Sam no doubt that he never has to change. That's the truth. When you make your survival strategy dependent upon ending racism, then you are assuming, first of all, you're assuming that racism in that society is some kind of a flaw in the system that can be fixed, rather than something that is absolutely foundational to how that whole society operates. You're treating it like a problem to be solved rather than a permanent condition that needs to be navigated, that needs to be mitigated, that needs to be neutralized in terms of your own life. Now, obviously, African Americans, Muslims, so-called Latinos and so forth, all members of the global majority in the United States, who in the United States are called minorities, obviously they've been navigating. They've been navigating those conditions all this time, but they have been navigating under the false hope, in my opinion. I mean, to one extent or another, they've been navigating under the false hope that American society will eventually give up its bigotry, which is unrealistic. And that has, in my opinion, gotten in the way of taking the kinds of actions that you actually need to take. As long as you hold that as some kind of an objective to so-called end racism, obviously you are giving your oppressors veto power over your own progress. You're saying, literally, I can only be safe, I can only be successful, I can only be free if you choose to stop oppressing me. That's not power, that's begging. And they are never going to grant you what you beg for. They're never going to grant you what you're begging for. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have to beg in the first place. They know what you need. You wouldn't need to ask if they cared about you having it. And you've been asking for so long, you can't possibly believe that they don't know what you want. If you don't know by now, wallahi, if you don't know by now that they are not going to give you what you want, then you're like some sort of a prisoner on death row who's waiting for a reprieve from the governor, and the governor is the one himself who's going to pull the electric chair switch. So you're sitting there waiting for a reprieve, and he shows up, and you think maybe there's some good news. You think he's going to let you off the hook, and all he says to you is, do you have any last words? No. Asking racists to stop being racist so that you can be free is like asking a parasite to stop extracting blood from your body because it's bad for your health. Well, the parasite doesn't care about your health. He's feeding himself. You understand? And he knows that he's going to be able to keep right on feeding himself off of you, off of your blood, as long as all you do is wait for him to change his diet. You get my point? I'm just telling you like it is. It's not pretty. It's not pretty. It's ugly. And it doesn't get any better looking with age. And understand that the racist element in that society is a sub-element of the overall system. I think it's crucial for you to understand this, because you're talking about a society in which 10% of the population owns and controls 70 to 80% of all the wealth. That's bigotry. Yes, it is. It's bigotry. It's bigotry. It's dehumanization and subjugation. And the truth is that it is systemic, and it is fundamental to that society, to the way that that society runs and operates. That's a fact. That's 10% of the population that despises 90% of the population, no matter what so-called race they are. Because the fundamental issue is not that individual Americans are racist or have racist attitudes or what have you. No, the fundamental issue that everyone in that society is living under is that you are economically captive to systems that are designed exclusively to extract wealth from you, to politically marginalize you in a structure that does not represent your interests. Listen, the whole world is turning away from America. That's a fact. The whole world is turning away from America. It's turning away from the West. And they're turning towards each other. They're turning away from the colonizers, and they're turning towards each other. And if you are a so-called minority in the West, a so-called minority in America, then like I say, you are actually part of the global majority. That means that your parents or your grandparents or your ancestors come from the global South. The truth is that you are diaspora communities over there. And in my opinion, you need to do over there what your people are doing in their part of the world. In other words, turning away from them and turning towards each other. And I mean, don't just turn towards each other over there. No, turn towards your brothers and sisters in the lands that your people came from, where your ancestors came from. You need to understand that when the society tries to make you identify yourself as an American citizen and not as part of the diaspora of the global South, they're trying to make you reduce yourself. They're trying to make you isolate yourself and accept the lie that you are a minority. You're a minority, not that 10% that's controlling all the money, and not that the so-called white population that represents maybe 15% of the people on earth. Do you understand? You're the minority. When you accept that you're an American, the whole point is to get you to internalize the falsehood that you're small and they're big. Citizenship is an optical illusion if you understand it properly. If your people came from Africa or Asia or so-called Latin America, and ICE comes after you, and you cry out, I'm an American citizen, this shouldn't happen to me, you think that that's a reason why this shouldn't be happening? No, it's exactly why it's happening to you. That's exactly why it's happening to you. Because when you call yourself that, when you call yourself an American citizen, you're calling yourself a minority. You're calling yourself weak. You're calling yourself vulnerable. You're calling yourself someone who hasn't got any backup. When you call yourself that, you're calling yourself the prey that has wandered away from the herd. Meaning you are calling yourself eligible for oppression, eligible for subjugation and brutality in that society where the law of the jungle is actually how they operate. I really hope you understand me. I truly hope you understand me. Saying that you're an American citizen when you come from the global majority That's not a defense against ICE. That's an invitation to ICE. I've talked about this before. You need to think about, or it would be worthwhile for you to think about, as a goal or as an objective to pursue, to join BRICS. I'm not joking. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm completely serious. So-called minority communities should try to join BRICS. I know why you think that sounds like a joke, because African Americans, right, so-called Latino Americans and whatnot, they're not a country. They don't constitute a country. Only countries can join BRICS, and you're not a country. Okay, try to think beyond the obvious constraints, please. Don't think in terms of formal BRICS membership. Try to think in terms of how you can create a new category for BRICS recognition and BRICS cooperation. Say a BRICS affiliated community, for example, something like this, a category like this. You can think of all of the plausible criteria, like say a given diaspora community, their ancestral heritage should be from a country that either is a current member of BRICS, a current BRICS member state, or else they come from a state that would otherwise qualify to apply for BRICS membership. And there should be a demonstrable pattern of marginalization for that community. Because let's be honest, BRICS is unofficially an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist economic organization. So I'm saying you can argue that this or that diaspora community in the West exists actually as a quasi-colonized de facto global South population that's located in the West, located in America, and it's there due to historical coercion. And that this community has continues to suffer coercion within that country itself. So you're looking for economic exclusion relative to the host country's dominant population, America's dominant population. Political underrepresentation, historical colonial, neo-colonial relationships within the state, meaning exploitation, meaning discrimination that you suffer, meaning state violence that you suffer, mass incarceration that you suffer. I don't think that's a hard case to make, frankly, especially when you're talking about African Americans in America. Then you'll need for that diaspora community, whichever community you're talking about, they'll need to have some degree of organizational coherence, meaning you have to have some sort of recognized representation, representative organizations that are capable of formal engagement with BRICS, BRICS members, member states, other countries, some sort of institutional bodies that can carry out something that's more or less analogous to state-state diplomacy. You understand? And of course, you'd need the diaspora community would have to be big enough. You'd have to have sufficient population density to make it even worthwhile to deal with you. And then you want to put in some sort of a clause about how the diaspora community that's applying for the BRICS recognition isn't a separatist movement. You can't be advocating the violent overthrow of the host country's government or something like that. Wanting to secede or have your own, state. BRICS obviously doesn't want to be involved in anything that's overtly subversive or insurrectionist or anything like that. But think about it. Applying for BRICS membership or trying to navigate something like this is a practical, non-rhetorical recognition of the fact that the colonial legacy doesn't only exist inside the formerly colonized countries, but it exists in the communities that were displaced from those countries, most likely due to war, due to economic sabotage, due to deindustrialization, and of course, obviously, because of the literal slave trade. Some people left their lands because the West extracted all their resources and left them in poverty. And then, of course, some other people, plenty of people left because they themselves were the resources that were being extracted. That deserves to be acknowledged, not just in speeches and not just in statements, but recognized and acknowledged in actual, practical, real-world ways. Imagine this sort of a program. If you had something like this would be a kind of formal acknowledgement of shared global South identity to diaspora communities in America or in the West. You could maybe get access to BRICS cultural educational programs. You could get some sort of an observer status at the BRICS summits. I mean, inshallah, maybe even diaspora communities could even potentially get conditional access to loans for community development from the New Development Bank. You understand? If you have this kind of status, if you have this kind of status with BRICS, this kind of connection with BRICS, that would facilitate trade for community-owned businesses in your area with BRICS economies. There could be educational exchange programs with BRICS universities. You understand? Potentially, you could establish expedited pathways to citizenship or anyway, permanent residency in BRICS nations, in BRICS member states. Your community could have direct engagement with BRICS foreign ministries. There's no reason why you can't do this. I mean, the potential benefits are absolutely massive. And obviously this could work not only for just the African American community, or not even just only with regards to America. I mean, if you think about North Africans, for example, in France, or the Pakistani, Bangladeshi community in the UK, you can think of plenty of other examples. I mean, the Palestinian diaspora, on and on. There's plenty of people who could benefit from something like this. That's practical morality. You're not just asking people to be good. You're trying to build systems that actually create safeguards for yourself against the bad behavior that exists by others. You're not waiting for bigots to stop being bigots. Like I've said many, many times, you need parallel systems that will bypass the systems that oppress you. That's what real solutions look like. That's what real morality looks like applied in the real world. Your own sources of financing, your own supply chains, your own trade relationships, right? Your own community governance structures that you create yourself among each other, your own economic networks. See, this is what I mean by practical morality versus performative morality. Performative morality, that's protest signs and diversity statements and politicians making speeches about equality and justice and what have you. That's all theater. No, practical morality is actual institutions that actually work and that actually protect you and that actually create the conditions for you to flourish, regardless of what racists think. We're not concerned about reforming them, because that's what you would be building if you were aiming at trying to get some sort of a BRICS recognition. Do you see what I mean? The objective itself, BRICS recognition, BRICS acceptance, that's less important than what you would build in the process of pursuing that goal. Every step towards that goal is a step towards economic sovereignty, is a step towards political autonomy and civilizational dignity. BRICS recognition would just be a coup de grace. But everything that you build on the path to that, everything that you build on the way to that, would constitute practical liberation already. Again, I've talked about this many times, I know. But look at the numbers. African Americans, if African Americans were considered as a separate economy, then that is an economy that generates somewhere between $1.6 to $2 trillion in economic activity every year. You understand? That's massive. That's larger than most countries' entire GDP. That's equivalent to Brazil, which is a founding member of BRICS. You have a massive economy already right now. But right now you're functioning like a colonized nation. You understand? You have economic activity, but you don't have economic sovereignty. You don't have economic control. You generate wealth, but you don't control the wealth that you generate. You participate in every single sector of the economy, mostly as labor and mostly as consumers, not as owners and not as decision makers. Your spending power is absolutely enormous, but it flows out of your communities into the hands of people who have no interest whatsoever in your well-being or the well-being of your community. Just like a colonized country. You understand? So you thought that your struggle was trying to gain acceptance in America, trying to end racism in America. No, your struggle is trying to liberate yourself from America. You are yourselves in an anti-colonial struggle, whether you know it or not. And no colonized country ever tried to gain the acceptance of their colonizers. They tried to get themselves out from under their colonizers. And that's what you should be doing. This is the only thing, in my opinion, that makes sense for African Americans or any other diaspora community from the global majority that's living in that country. That's the only thing that makes sense. If colonization was the ultimate version of offshoring, well, your communities represent the onshoring of colonization. And I don't think that it could even get any clearer than what we're seeing right now in America with ICE and so forth. You're literally having slave raids taking place across that country. So I'm saying, see yourself and your community as literally a colonized nation, as an occupied people. And every colonized country had pre-existing structures. They had pre-existing authority structures, governance structures, and so forth. And those continued in one form or another, even while the occupation existed. They operated beneath the imposed colonial governments. And these formed the foundation for their independence later on. And it helped them to struggle against the colonizers during the colonization. And that's what needs to be built, in my opinion, some semblance of that. You need some sort of unified economic governance. Right now, your economic activity, like I said, it's fragmented across millions of individuals, across thousands and thousands of small businesses, with no coordination, with no unified strategy, no collective leverage. That's counterproductive. That's counter-liberation. You need to create some sort of a diaspora economic council. I've talked about it before. You can call it whatever you like. The name isn't important. The function is what's important. Have regional chapters across the country, advisory boards and so forth, People with actual expertise in economics, in law, international relations, and so forth. Every community has people like that. The point is to have some sort of a body, some sort of an institution that can speak with one voice about the economic interests of the community. This isn't a far-off dream. This is something that you could literally start organizing next month. Have community meetings, online coordination, and so forth. It's very easy to facilitate something like this. Build catalogs of businesses. Create databases of economic activity. Start the work of actually understanding your collective economic position. Get a full map of what your situation is. I'm sure that a great deal of this is already being done to one degree or another by different organizations in civil society. But these civil society organizations are not treated as, and maybe they don't see themselves as, or even maybe they don't behave as, anti-colonial institutions. This is a mindset recalibration that needs to take place. Look, I'm not advocating aggression. I'm not advocating hostility. But there's a big unspoken element in these community organizations that's getting lost, in my opinion, because it is unspoken. You know, in your mission statement, if you have an NGO of some form, your mission statement is to help the community, help the African American community, help this or that community, the so-called, any member of the so-called minority communities. You want everyone to know that you're there to help, right? That's what you have to say in your mission statement. But help against who? Help them against what? No, the fact of the matter is that you are living under aggression. You are living under hostility. You are living under persecution and bigotry. Conditions are being imposed, and you say that you want to help the people who are enduring those conditions, but you don't want to talk about who's imposing those conditions, and that those conditions are being imposed. Do you understand me? There is an adversarial reality going on here. There's no two ways about it. You have to acknowledge this. You have to recognize this and act accordingly. Every organization that says that they're out there to help the community is, or should understand that it is, or should be treated as if it is, and they should behave as if it is, an anti-colonial revolutionary organization. In my opinion, there needs to be some urgency and some importance given to what they're doing. You know, if people are compiling a catalog of so-called minority-owned businesses, well, that's a chart of an anti-colonization network of economic sovereignty. You understand? This is important. It needs to be framed like this. It needs to be understood like this. In my opinion, this is very important, because if you don't understand it like this, then there's a danger that people will just fall into acting just like the same way that the oppressors do, the colonizers do. And they'll just use their community-owned status of their company as a technique for more extraction themselves and self-enrichment, instead of being part and parcel of a larger, broader, deeper community struggle for autonomy. So in my opinion, you need to start by registering and coordinating these community-owned businesses. Right now, there's no comprehensive registry that I know of. There may be. So nobody knows where they are, who they are, what sectors they're in, what they need, what they can provide to each other, and so forth. Create that registry. Make it possible for African American owned businesses or so-called minority owned businesses to find each other, to trade with each other, to support each other, to invest in each other. Build an actual ecosystem rather than isolated entities that are all just trying to survive. You know, survive separately in a hostile environment, because that's what you're in. You're in a hostile environment. Now, I don't actually know if a registry like this exists. It may. Alhamdulillah, I haven't been in the U.S. for over 20 years, but back in the day, there were only sort of localized versions of this, and only in specific sectors like restaurants and maybe mechanics and so forth. And then you should try to create investment funds. I've talked about it again before. Pool your resources. Now African American wealth is scattered and isolated. Like I say, individual families trying to build something with no support. You can pool your resources and combine that into some sort of a diaspora investment fund. Like I say, pool your resources. Make strategic investments in businesses in your community that serve the community interests. Finance the creation of institutions that you need yourself. Build that parallel infrastructure. And obviously, like I said, this is not only for the African American community. It's for any community. Any community can do this. Every community needs to do this because, yes, like I say, 90% of you are colonized by 10%. And that's something I've talked about many, many times. Community sovereignty, building sufficiency zones, establishing sufficiency zones, parallel structures, and so forth. And you can make sure that these funds, this community fund or what have you, it doesn't operate according to the same predatory financial system that you're currently trapped in. No interest-based exploitation. You can have equity partnerships where the risk is shared. You understand? Investment decisions being made based on community benefit, not just profit maximization. That can be determined by a committee, by a council. This is about trying to build something that actually works for you, not replicating the same extractive systems that have been bleeding you dry. And in the process of all this, you are building community institutional structures that you'll be able to utilize in the future. And yes, you can establish direct trade partnerships, trade relationships with the BRICS nations. You don't need BRICS recognition in order to do that. Like I said, your consumption power is enormous already. You're keeping entire industries solvent, but you have zero control over your own supply chains. Everything is mediated through American corporations that mark up the prices, that control the availability in the market, and they extract maximum profit while giving you the minimum value. It doesn't have to be like that. You can have direct relationships with Chinese manufacturers. There's no reason why you can't do that. Asian suppliers, African producers, Chinese manufacturers, like I say. Everything doesn't have to go through middlemen. There's no reason for that. I mean, I don't mean to repeat myself. I've said all of this before, but it does bear repeating. I think sometimes we need to hear ideas reiterated several times before they finally click. Pursuing BRICS membership, in my opinion, sort of forces you to think of yourselves as a nation that is connected to the rest of the world, not as a minority begging for inclusion, not as a demographic within someone else's country, but as a people with your own economic interests, with your own political aspirations, with your own civilizational heritage, and with your own collective destiny. That psychological shift is absolutely vital. And like I say, you're not going to get anywhere without it. Now, I know that you might be stuck on the idea of being an American. You might be stuck on that idea, especially because if you're African American, then your ancestors bled and they sweated and they built that country. Look, I'm not telling you to disavow what is your right. I'm telling you the practical way to get your right. And that's not going to be by buying into the bait and switch con job of citizenship, because that's what it is. You can't put your faith in the idea of trying to get your rights, your heritage rights, the legacy of what your ancestors earned. You can't put your faith in trying to get that from the same people who denied your ancestors those rights in the first place. The same government. You know, talking about your rights as a citizen and thinking it's going to be anything that you can cash in the bank. You can't cash that anywhere. Your citizenship, so-called. No, they didn't sweat and bleed for that country. They sweated and they bled for you. And that goes for every diaspora community, for every immigrant community, and so forth. Everyone who went over there did not go over there to make America great again. They went over there for their own children. They went over there for their families, to try to secure a better life for themselves and their families than the misery that America and that the West had inflicted on them in their home countries. So you don't owe anything to that country. You owe it to yourself to make a better life for yourself, in spite of that country's determination to deny you a better life. And the way to make a better life for yourself and for your children and for your community is to recognize that you do have to do it on your own, with clear-eyed understanding that that society is going to try to hinder you in every way possible at every turn. So you need to understand your community as a nation within a nation, as a colonized nation within a colonizing nation. You understand me? And you need to understand that your struggle is adversarial in nature. You're not in a struggle to join the system, you're in a struggle to separate from the system. And that's the key difference between this and the end racism approach. Because when you work to end racism and fail, which you will, you'll have nothing. You will have spent decades protesting, decades petitioning, decades voting and pleading, and you're still essentially in the same structural position that you were at the beginning, because none of that built you any actual power. None of those actions built you any actual power. But when you work to build economic sovereignty and build international relationships, even if you don't achieve the ultimate objective, you've built real things. You have institutions now. You have networks now. You have alternatives now. You have leverage now. You have reduced your dependency on systems and on people that hate you. That's a win. That's a practical strategy. That's practical morality. Like I said, you don't need pie in the sky. You need a bakery. Understand, everything that I'm telling you here rests on one fundamental premise. You have to see reality clearly. You have to see it clearly. You have to stop believing in fairy tales about American democracy and equal opportunity and believing in the eventual triumph of justice in America. You have to stop making your strategy dependent on racists having a moral awakening. America is what it is, and it always has been what it is, and it will continue to be what it is. The violence, the exploitation, the dehumanization, none of that represents a deviation. That's the normal operation of the system. I've said it many times. You need to build as if your survival depends on your own capabilities rather than upon their goodwill, because it does, and it always has. Capability is the only currency in that country, I'm telling you. You are not going to end racism in America, but what you can do, by building, by connecting with the Global South, by identifying as and operating as a diaspora community, by building cohesion, by building capability within your community, insha'Allah bi'idhnillah, you can make the racists incapable of holding you down and holding you back. And that's the moral thing to do.